Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury, 1. A few months ago, the Business Committee requested the inclusion of a presentation of Archbishop's activity to Synod as an experiment. Not the activity is an experiment, the report is the experiment. If the Synod feels it to be of no value, no doubt they will tell the Business Committee, who will discontinue us. The last couple of months have seen the terrible atrocities in Peshawar and Nairobi and the typhoon in the Philippines. The first was aimed at an Anglican church. The second deeply affected Anglicans, among others. I offered to visit both. The Primate of Pakistan felt that that would not be helpful in the light of the security situation at the time, while I was able to get fleetingly to Nairobi for a condolence visit, where I had an emotional and warm welcome from Archbishop Wabukala. In the light of the terrible casualties in Peshawar, I hope the Synod is happy if on all of our behalf I send a further message of support to our suffering sisters and brothers in Pakistan. I'll take that as a yes. The attacks in Pakistan are amongst many which have been afflicting Christians around the world. Many parts of the Anglican Communion are suffering greatly, and the Synod will, I trust, acknowledge both the suffering and courage of many of our sister and brother churches in places like Nigeria. The issue of how we support each other and how we understand and confront violent attacks in the light and grace of Christ is certainly one of the greatest of our age. Earlier this month, I was at the World Council of Churches in Busan in South Korea. If I'm being really honest, which occasionally I allow myself to be when I'm in private, I confess to being surprised, having believed the propaganda about the uselessness of such events, yet being confounded by the reality of a World Church gathering seeking to express love for Christ and for each other. I shall believe less propaganda in the future. The WCC certainly has its issues of unity and coherence, but then who doesn't? But it holds together an extraordinary diversity, united in the main by love for Jesus Christ. The last few months have seen changes in the leadership of ecumenical work. In particular, efforts to reduce costs have led to seeking to avoid overlap between Lambeth and the Council of Christian Unity, with the weight of ecumenical work at Lambeth being taken by the bishop at Lambeth, together with the lead bishops for each dialogue or conversation. This development of closer working relationships is not only cost-effective, but much more importantly, is liberating a fresh impetus and imagination in ministry. In dialogue with the Catholic Church, as well as very positive work in Archic and English Arc, there will, at the end of this week, be a joint bishops' meeting with the focus being on evangelization. One very important and major initiative can be announced today. It's not large, but it is symbolically significant. For 24 years, 3 different Anglican orders have had sisters at Lambeth supporting the spirituality there. This has been a gift of almost immeasurable value. Sadly, for reasons within the orders, this is no longer possible for them. Accordingly, from January, a Catholic order with an ecumenical and teaching vocation will be created, initially with 4 members at Lambeth. They're called the Chemin Neuf. This arrangement has been put in place by the Reverend Dr. Joe Wells, chaplain, my chaplain. It's an ecumenical step of some significance. In October, I was at the Porvoo Primates meeting in Reykjavik. This was a first for me, and the meeting was notable for its great warmth, constructive purpose, and hopes for a significant level of further visible unity. The dialogue with Pourvu has been led by the Bishop of Newcastle, whose work has been absolutely exceptional in this regard. In January, I hope to meet the Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarch. Within the Anglican Communion, the schedule has also been busy. The Archbishop of York has made a significant number of visits, most notably recently to Canada and to Cairo. I have started a programme of visiting all the primates of the Anglican Communion, very briefly, on a personal and private basis. Out of the 37, 10 have so far been visited, and 27 therefore remain, for those of you who, like me, struggle with arithmetic. I don't know why I put that sentence in. With the aim of completing the visits by about a year from now. While I was in Nairobi for the condolence visit, I was there just before the beginning of GAFCON, and I had the opportunity to benefit from meeting a number of primates who had already arrived for it. This was a great pleasure and, as always, an education. As leader of GAFCON, Archbishop Wabukala was as gracious as could have been wished. There were naturally, as you may have noticed, different views expressed about different aspects of the Anglican Communion while I was in Nairobi and subsequently, including views about me, which, it has to be said, were not invariably warm and cuddly. But I was most glad to have had I was genuinely most glad to have had the opportunity to meet, and I have to say that the overwhelming response was not only kind, but also deeply encouraging. In the political sphere, the last few months have been very busy indeed. The Parliamentary Banking Standards Commission, initially intended to be all over by Christmas, like other things about 100 years ago, but in this case last Christmas, continues in its final stages, which it's been in since January of this year, with a major debate next week on the more than 1,000 pages of reports which the Commission produced during the time I was with it. I remain on it, although it's technically coming to an end. And it is also heavily involved in resulting legislation, in which I'm inevitably involved as well. It has been a good opportunity for the Church to contribute to national thinking in an area where we are not always institutionally visible. But I will be more than delighted when it is buried, ideally with a stake through its heart and garlic between its teeth. At the same time, there has been the Same-Sex Marriage Act, which again took much time, for both the Archbishop of York and myself, and a significant number of other bishops. I've spoken of this at other points and don't intend to say any more about that now. As always, there have been a number of meetings with political leaders, part of an ongoing dialogue in which most bishops are involved in one way or another. And it is clear that these discussions are almost invariably warmly welcomed by both sides, and a great privilege for all of us who are involved in them, even when there is disagreement. And lastly, I want to draw your attention to a new initiative that accompanies this synod meeting, a pattern of continuous prayer that is operating in the Church House Chapel just along the hallway, along with parishes and other communities from around the country. I do encourage you warmly to drop in there in a gap. It's rolling from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. the whole time we're in session, and you can drop in for 2 minutes or 20 or whatever it seems appropriate. Prayer reminds us of the big picture, that what we are doing here is all about God, a reminder we sometimes need more than ever in the midst of our legislative processes. Let us therefore hold a moment of silence, and particularly hold before the Lord those who have suffered and are suffering around the world from persecution, violence, and natural disaster. Lord, in your mercy, Thank you, Madam Chair.